hours after the Rwanda bill came into law, the French Navy escorted a packed migrant dinghy across into Britain, despite 5 people tragically dying as they made the treacherous journey. And now, after 2 years of wrangling over Rwanda, it begs the question, will the Prime Minister's strategy of deterrence actually work? Joining me to discuss all of this, Deputy Editor for The Sun, Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, Ryan Saby, broadcaster and journalist Emma Wolfe, and barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn. There he is, the man himself. Welcome to all of you. You've been here already once. So, we were here last night, went off air slightly before it all went through the House of Lords. I mean, I saw people saying today, Ryan, so the House of Lords is effectively now officially useless, which is probably a bit harsh. But, I mean, all of this surely could have been done quicker and, you know, made into law more than a month ago. Yeah, well, it could have been, but I don't think that's the House of Lords' fault. I think it's the government's fault. I think they said this is emergency legislation 5 months ago. They could have got the legislation done and dusted before Christmas. You remember, go back to before Easter. Yeah. They didn't push the legislation before the MPs and peers went away for their Easter break. They could have done it then. So they talk about the emergency legislation. They haven't acted as if it's an emergency. And part of the reason for that, I think, is they're trying to get all their ducks in a row. They're trying to get the airfield in place. They were trying to get the flights. They were trying to get the judges. They were trying to get all the caseworkers, and they didn't quite have that. But have they got it now, though? But if we take Rishi Sunak at his word, and he said at that press conference, he stood there in Downing Street and he said that they're all ready to go. So, and I think it's going to take 10, 12 weeks. You've got to work out whether they're going to have any legal challenges. They seem to think they've got 150 cases that are actually legally watertight. I'm not sure about that. I mean, Emma, I don't have confidence that they've got this.
Well, his body language was interesting at that press conference as well, because he looked as though he was a man who finally got it past the line, didn't he, and work on that sort of basis. But I think... But he can't, hang on, but he can't believe that, Emma, can he? Can he really believe that? I think he has to believe it. Is your name Emma, by the way? Promises. Is your name Emma? He's not.
Oh, I'm sorry. You keep answering when I say Emma. That means I want her to answer me. Emma, please.
Well, no. I mean, look, he's become utterly fixated, almost like a man possessed about getting it through. So finally he's got it through. Is there any link between stopping the small boat and this ludicrous Rwanda? I don't see the link. It is not a deterrent. Right. This is not... Last night, this morning, we saw 5 people have drowned, including a 4-year-old child. Yeah. And I thought the most significant thing about that was the number of people on the boat. 100 people on a boat. And Sunak trying to make out that that his emergency legislation finally going through is somehow compassionate. It's going to stop small boats. No, if you'd put a fraction of resources that have been hundreds of millions of pounds that have gone into this farcical legislation into actually stopping people where they were, or dealing with their problems where they were, instead of having them cross, you would have saved lives. So I just don't see the link.
There's 100 people on this boat. Yeah. Now, seeing as this accident happened at sea, some of them went back to France. Right. The others went to the UK. This is how desperate these people are.
But this is what happens, though.
It's not a deterrent.
But they will carry on doing it.
Yeah, of course they will. Andrew?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the pictures they show in the press, however, it doesn't look like 100 people on one of those sort of boats. So it is interesting to look at that sort of side. Whether it's a deterrent or not, as you say, Rwanda at the moment can only process 200 people anyway. So that's why they're looking at Costa Rica and various other places to make that make sense. What has to happen, as we always say, is the focus needs to be on the people traffickers. Get the message to them that we're actually after you and we're going to try and deal with that.
Yeah, but that's not going to work, is it? Because you might as well say to drug dealers, don't bring drugs into Britain because we'll put you in prison. They know that already. They still do it because the money is so huge.
This is part of Labour's big idea. They are going to go sort of upstream and they're going to try and find the people smugglers. How are you going to, you know, we getting British police work with the European police, you know, really closely? I don't know if that's going to work and be successful.
Well, all of it's been tried, hasn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, we've
it's
given
not like
money.
Rishi Sunak hasn't thought of that.
Right. And also now we've got the UN talking to, you know, separate sort of commercial organisations saying if you do take part in this kind of effort, like if you fly people to Rwanda, you know, you may well be breaking international law. Yeah. So, I mean, they're throwing their tuppence halfpenny worth in as well.
Yeah, you look at the airlines, I mean, it seems like it's been really, really hard to try and find some airlines to actually to take these migrants to Rwanda. Right. So much so that the government have been saying they've got really robust plans, and part of that robust plans, it seems like they may well have the RAF on standby just in case some planes may not.
Well, exactly right. And the Immigration Minister, I think Tomlinson, was on TV earlier on today saying that they haven't. He was asked directly, "Have you actually got cases that you can now deport?" Yeah. And he didn't seem very sure. He wasn't sure if they'd actually got a list. He wasn't sure if people had been processed and then refused. They don't seem to be prepared for it at all, it seems to me.
No, and exactly, and you don't have... It's not as though you have people on small boats being taken off the boats when they land and put on flights. Yeah, I mean, you know, that isn't a deterrent in that way because they know what will happen.
Yeah.
The people who are being hand-picked, it made it sound like an exclusive kind of guest list.
Yeah.
The people who are being hand-picked, the 150 or so, will be from the backlog.
And where are these people? You know,
who are they? Where are they?
Yeah, and I mean, if they are going to be taken out, are they being taken out of hotels? Are they being taken out of holding areas, of you know, ex-army camps? Are they in accommodation in flats and houses?
I think legally it's going to be very hard to actually, those people who, you know, once this law gets royal assent in the next few days, I think what they may try and do is anyone who then comes over, they will be, hate to say the phrase, but the guinea pigs of the people who may be taken, they may be detained, because once they get into the community, they will just disappear.
Right.
And you can guarantee what's going to happen is the press around that. Sunak has to have that victory. His 5 pledges, he's got to get at least one person there to Rwanda, and I think that will happen.
I think that would be just pathetic, though. If that's
I think that's
happens.
even worse.
It's
almost.
even worse.
One
almost.
or
We go, oh, we've got one.
20 people.
But maybe you can't answer this question, but I'm going to ask you, Andrew, you're a lawyer. Presumably, they haven't outlawed legal aid being made available for these people
you have to
fight deportation. So there'll be a string of lawyers
Of course there
lining
will.
up to
There'll be
take legal
so
aid
many
money.
last-minute, you know, those very last-minute death row appeals before they're put onto
that was the Andrew as opposed to the Emma, but it was good, but it worked well.
I'm now a criminal barrister.
But you're absolutely right, and that's what they've done. They've redefined what's safe, which is a bizarre way of doing it. I always talk about Abraham Lincoln. If you call the tail of a dog a leg, how many legs does a dog have? It's still 4 because calling a tail doesn't make it a leg. And the reality is exactly that. So just because they've called it a safe country doesn't necessarily mean that the lawyers can't turn around and say, actually, this person is not going to be safe. There are other laws and regulations which will happen.
Right.
So what they've got to look for is to make sure that there's a certain case that they can get. I do predict, I mean, a definition of spring will probably go into summer, but that's going to be the reality. They will get at least one as a point of principle, and the press around that will be huge. But exactly that sort of thing, lawyers will have a field day trying to stop it.
Well, one of the things that they were arguing about in the House of Lords, I think the last amendment, which they eventually gave up on, was to have something put into the bill which said if it becomes more dangerous in the future, you know, we'll have to stop sending people there. So there's bound to be lawyers who'll get up in court and say, well, how do we know that it's now safe, despite the fact that you said it was safe 3 months ago? It might not be safe now. They'll just go on and on with it, won't they?
Yeah, no, so, and I think that the trouble is you can have those individual cases. They'll always find a reason. And we had one lawyer on the radio this morning saying that, you know, does mental health come into it? Well,
it will.
It will.
How long is a piece of string? I mean, one thing is for sure, this has ruined Rwanda's reputation. And as for those other countries you mentioned, Costa Rica and all the other ones that they approached...
Great to begin with, to be fair.
No other country will want to go near a UK government deportation scheme in the future. I mean, I know Rwanda have made a lot of money out of this thus far. Yeah, take the money. But I don't think they would, if they could go back.
I think
who will ever go to Rwanda now as a holiday destination? No way.
Right. And what about the sort of political lesson from this? Can we say that we now know there won't be an election in July as a result of this? Will they try and do an election early if they do manage to get a couple of people sent over there?
I think he has to. A plane has to take off, and I think there probably has to be, as he said yesterday, there has to be a regular rhythm of planes going off. And I think the thinking in Downing Street has always been this: looking at a general election in October, November. I just don't think. You wouldn't want to go into a general election where you haven't got any planes taken off to Rwanda. You are still technically in recession, and the waiting lists in the NHS are still high. I still think he needs a bit more time to actually get things in his favour.
Yeah, it might get worse though.
And he is still saying...
This is the trouble. Some people in Cabinet have been actually saying you need to go early because it's a damage limitation exercise. You actually, you know, you could make things worse by going longer.
Or you can wait until Trump gets elected because you might have a better chance, and that would be interesting.
Yeah, well, who knows?
And he is still sort of saying the second half of the year.
Yes.
I think that's where the money is.
Definitely October, November.
Well, listen, we'll come back to all of you very shortly. You're watching Independent Republic of Mike Graham.